Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex over at Laser Everything, and today we're talking all about inversion. We're going to be talking about inverting raster graphics. We're going to be talking about inverting vector graphics. When you should do it, when you shouldn't, what it's going to look like when it's done, different methods for taking care of those things so that you can utilize all of the features of your vector editing software to get the results that you want to get. So don't go anywhere because we're getting started right now. Alright guys, so we're talking about inversion today, and there's two basic types of inversion that we're going to cover in today's episode. We've got vector inversion over here on the left, and we've got photo or raster inversion over here on the right. They follow more or less the same principles, but they're used for different things, and we'll talk about a lot of that as we kind of get into it. First up, we have our raster inversions. Okay, so let's take a look. We're going to zoom in over here and take a look at this and see if we can decode some of the mystery over here surrounding raster inversions, when you're going to need to do them, what are they for. So let's just, for the sake of argument, pretend for a minute. We've got three materials over here. We've got like a black anodized aluminum, and aluminum or steel or some other silvery kind of metal, and some wood. I know the colors aren't perfect, just bear with me. Now, we have a bunch of different raster graphics over here, and they're not as different as they look, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, but we're kind of separating these into two groups. The first group is items that mark lighter than the base material. So a great example of that is black anodized aluminum. Whatever we mark on this material is going to be lighter than the background, okay? The other category is going to be materials that mark darker than the background. So our steel and our wood are both going to mark darker than the background material color itself. Now, the reason that we have two sets of rasters over here is because these two rasters, both inverted and not inverted, are comprised of white pixels. And again, that's because on our piece of black anodized aluminum over here, any pixels we mark onto this thing are going to be white. So these two graphics are comprised of white pixels. Down here for this section, these two raster images, both the standard and inverted, are comprised of black pixels, and that's because, again, these materials are going to mark black. So they're different situations based on how the material is actually going to mark, and that's the main takeaway here. If we take a look up here at our black anodized aluminum, okay, first over here we have our non-inverted image. So I know it looks inverted on this dark background, but these are actually, all of the darkest parts of this image are white, and that's because, again, the black aluminum is going to mark white. When we take our non-inverted image and put it on our anodized aluminum, it looks inverted. And that's because our normal images are made up of groups of dark pixels. We're used to seeing things like images printed on white paper or on white screens, okay? But when we take those pixels and we flip them around, and we're putting white pixels on a black image, it's actually going to come out looking backwards. This is a great example of when we will need to invert, because the marking that we're doing on the black anodized aluminum is brighter than the black anodized aluminum itself. We need to invert our image. So instead of marking the darkest parts of this image, we're going to mark the brightest parts instead. And that's when we get this inverted image down here. Note, it looks appropriate even on the gray background of Illustrator before we even throw it onto our black anodized aluminum, because the gray background of our Illustrator software is still darker than these pixels are being marked. So if we take our inverted image and drop it on our black anodized card, now you can see all of the pixels that we've marked are white. And that is why this inverted image works. That's why it works well on our black anodized card, because we're actually marking the areas on this card that represent the brightest parts of the image. So we're not marking the eyebrows here, right? We're marking the lighter areas of the face. We're not marking these dark portions of the mouth. We're marking the teeth, right? These white areas are the parts that are going to be marked. This is really important because if you don't invert your images on a dark material like black anodized aluminum, it's just not going to come out right. This again would be if we marked all the darkest parts of this photo, which is what we would normally do. It looks backwards, right? So we want to mark all the lightest parts of the photo, and that means that the image needs to be inverted. If we come down here and we take a look at our other set of raster images, in these two sets the pixels that are being marked are black. Okay, so in this bottom one down here we are marking all of the darkest parts of the image, and in this one up here we're marking all of the lightest parts of the image, right? The background is being marked. Now this is obviously not going to work. When we're marking all the lightest parts of the image, that's inverted, right? And we can clearly see that it's inverted. When we drag this onto the material that marks darker than the background, obviously that doesn't look right. So an inverted image is not going to work for us here, okay? The inverted image is not going to produce the result that we want. What we want to do is mark the darkest areas of the image. When we mark the darkest areas of the image, that's the bits that are actually going to be darkened by our laser beam. Okay, again, so we've got these details in the eyes here, the eyebrows, the shadows in the hair. Those are the pieces of the image that we are looking to mark. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, aluminum or steel or wood or whatever, as long as the material is marking darker than the actual material itself, you're going to want to use a non-inverted image. These two images don't look that different, but in reality we're marking different pixels. Okay, again, on the black anodized aluminum card, anything that's white in this image that you're seeing, anything that's showing up white at all, is going to be the areas that we're marking. The areas in this image that are white or brighter are the areas that are not being marked. I hope that makes sense. So I guess just to summarize, if the material you're marking is going to mark lighter than the material itself, you need to use an inverted image. If the material you're marking is going to mark darker than the material itself, you need to use a standard image. We're not going to get super in depth with this because we cover it in other places on the channel for other reasons, and if you haven't already seen the photo guide, I'll go ahead and throw a card up here in the top right corner so you can go check that out. But I did want to just go over how to invert photos in a couple different pieces of software for you really quick. So Photoshop is arguably the easiest. Right now we've just got a regular photo, but if we convert this to a bitmap real quick, which is how we would be marking it with our lasers, we'll just come to image mode bitmap and we hit OK. So here's our bitmap, and you can see right now the dots are marking the darkest areas of the image, right? So anything that is showing up dark in our image is what's going to actually be marked. Let's say we need to invert this so that we need to mark it on an anodized aluminum business card. Another great example for material that marks lighter, and it doesn't sound like it would, but glass, right? Glass marks bright white, and whatever is showing through the glass is going to be the color of the glass, because glass is transparent. So if we're marking this photo on glass, it would need to be inverted as well. So those are two great examples for you. Acrylic, same thing. Acrylic images on transparent or clear acrylic need to be inverted. So once we have this in bitmap, right, we're marking the darkest areas of our photo. We need to invert this because we're marking a material that marks lighter than the material itself. All we need to do is come up to Image, Adjustments, and Invert. Now the laser is going to mark all of the brightest areas of the image. It looks horrible in Photoshop. I know that, but this is the appropriate way to mark things like anodized aluminum business cards, and that's again because now we're going to have our highest concentration of marked pixels in the lightest area, and since the material is marking lighter, right, we need to make sure those match up. It's the same exact thing here in Lightburn. Okay, so if we right click and we come to adjust image, we've just got this negative image here, and we're not changing anything, right? Darkest parts of the image, like the inside of the eye, are being marked here, so this would be great for something like wood or steel or aluminum, right, where the mark is going to be darker than the actual material. If we're marking something like glass or anodized cards, we need to invert this. Okay, we've got this negative image right here, so we go ahead and check that, and now all of the brightest parts of the image are going to be marked instead. This can get a little confusing to look at. One of the nice things that Lightburn adds is this invert display over here. Invert display is nice because it shows you what the outcome is going to be rather than what is going to be sent to the laser. So this doesn't actually affect anything that's coming out of the software. All this does is just make it a little more convenient for you to see how things are going to end up if you want to go ahead and make adjustments. That way you're not guessing about the effect your modifications are going to have. So handy little thing over here. Remember, this doesn't affect what is actually output by this image editor. It's just there as a handy little tool so you can see what the changes you're making are actually going to do. But we'll go ahead and leave that off to avoid confusion. But yeah, so invert right there, negative image, super easy. Lastly, here in Ezcad, and I don't recommend this, I really recommend using an external raster editor for editing your raster images. I don't recommend doing them in Ezcad. It's just unreliable, but I wanted to show it as well. You have the invert button right over here. So if we check invert and apply, that's going to go ahead and switch that around so that the laser is marking all the brightest parts of the image, right? So there's your inversion right there on Ezcad. Don't forget, with Ezcad, if you do not click this apply button right here, your changes will not take effect. So make sure you hit apply after you make any changes to the bitmap file properties window. Again, I don't really recommend doing this in Ezcad. I'd much rather you do it in Photoshop or GIMP, which is free, or literally any other program. But the tool is there. So if you need to invert something like that, you can check the box and invert it right there in Ezcad. So anyway, guys, that's about all that I have to talk about raster stuff. If you want to learn more about photo engraving, again, I mentioned it earlier and we threw the card up there, but I do also have a link in the description of this video. If you want to see our photo engraving guide, we talk about this a little bit more, but I didn't want to create an episode about inversion without talking about rasters. So we can go ahead and get rid of these, and let's talk about inverting vectors. So we have a similar situation over here, right? We have our wood, our shiny metal, and our anodized metal for these examples, and a lot of people ask me, they want to invert vectors like these, the ones that you're seeing now. Note again, the mark that we do on a black anodized plate is going to be white, right? Because this is aluminum. Aluminum always engraves white. So, you know, we're getting a white mark over here, we're getting dark marks over here. I know they're black in this particular case, but any dark mark, I think the point stands. Now, so let's say for a minute that we actually want our text to be unmarked, right? And we want this box to be filled instead. We can do that. That's inverting graphics like these is actually pretty easy, and I want to walk you through this process because it's something that I do fairly regularly. First thing I'm going to do is hold Alt and click and drag just to make a copy of this so that we don't affect the original one. When we're done, we'll test our work over here. I made a couple extra copies of these palettes so that we have them and we can test them out. So let's say that we want to invert this, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make another copy of this. So we want two working copies. This is our original. We're saving this in case we mess up. The first thing that we're going to do, and this is really easy actually, guys, is we're going to select our image and we're going to come over here to our Pathfinder tools. If you don't have this window, you can find it up here in Window and then Pathfinder right there. So I've got the checkbox, mine shows up over here. If you don't, just click that, it'll open up. And the first thing we're going to do is hit Unite, and then we're going to Merge, and we're going to hit Unite again, and that's going to give us this solid shape right here. This solid shape is pretty awesome because it makes it super easy to create our inversion. So if we're going to grab this, right, we're going to grab this right here. The first thing that we're going to want to do is just add a bit of stroke to this. We want to give it a nice outline, and you'll see why in a second. So once it's got that good outline, we need to combine the outline with the rest of the shape. Right now it's just a stroke, and a weighted stroke isn't going to show up in Ezcad. So what we need to do is Object, Expand, and we'll hit OK. And then you'll see that we've expanded the stroke, so the stroke is overlapping the outside and the inside of the shape. And then we're going to do the same thing again. We're just going to come in here and Unite, and that's going to conform it all into one shape. The next thing we need to do is overlap these two items. And I promise this will all make sense in a minute, but first thing, we're going to group that. Let's just make sure that this is nice and grouped before we get started. Second thing we want to do is once we overlap these items, it's going to be black on black. We're not going to be able to see it. So let's go ahead and change the fill color on this to white or some other kind of light color. We'll just drop down our fill box over here and we're going to click white. And then lastly, we're going to align these items so that they're on top of one another. So I'm going to shift and click, and then we're going to do center and center. And if the white graphic is hidden behind the black one, that's not a big deal. Just select the black one, right click it, and we're going to go to arrange, send to back. So now we've got essentially the inverted version of this, right? So again, I'm going to make another copy, and here the text is what's being marked, right? Here the box is what's being marked, and our text has been essentially negated. But Ezcad is not going to like this situation over here with the extra outline in the box and stuff. So we do have one last thing we need to do to this. We're going to select the entire thing, and we're going to come to Pathfinder, and we're looking for trim, which is this one right here. And if we go ahead and hit trim, what it's going to do is anywhere any object overlaps, it's basically going to cut it out. You won't know this just looking at it because it groups it together when you trim. So we're going to need to right click, ungroup, and then we're going to deselect. Notice how I deselected there. If you don't deselect and you hit delete, it's going to delete your entire object. So you need to deselect first, then select a bit of white. We're going to do select, same, fill color, and it's selecting some of my other assets up here. Normally you wouldn't have these, and we'll go ahead and hit delete. And there you go. So that's how you get the negative, right? So we've got our positive over here on the left with our tree line is being marked, right? Our axes are being marked. Over here, the skyline is being marked. The axes and the trees are being left alone. And these two look differently. People have preferences between these two options. So, you know, just to show you what these look like, if we bring them over here onto our sample, there we go. So, now you can see like they're actually pretty visually different, and some people are definitely going to have a preference for one, some people are going to have a preference for the other. So that's the basic inversion. That's how I do a lot of my inverting. There is another way you can do it, kind of like a cheaty way. We're going to demonstrate that down here. So here we've got our mountain graphic, and of course I'm going to hold Alt and click and drag again to make a copy of that because we don't want to lose our original in case we mess up. So let's say we want to invert this. We can definitely do that. So we're going to, first of all, we're going to make this a little bit bigger. And the next thing we're going to do is flatten this into a raster. And so the main trick for this method is that when we flatten this into a raster and retrace it, it's going to give us a bunch of white assets. And we're going to keep those white assets and then recolor them. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. So let's make one more copy, again, just like we did last time. And you'll notice these are quite big. I'm making them quite big. And that's because when we rasterize and retrace, we really do need a big image to get a high quality tracing result, especially in Illustrator, right? So we've got our graphic here. We're going to come to Object, Rasterize. Here we want a high number, right? So high is 300. I typically like to do other and drop 600 in there. Just gives nice, good, clean results. It's going to take a second to rasterize, and boom. Now we've got a rasterized graphic. So this isn't a vector anymore. This is now flattened, and we're going to retrace it. So we'll hit Image Trace, and we'll hit OK. And it's going to take a second and retrace all of these lines. The reason that we're doing this is because when we expand it here, and we'll ungroup, we can get rid of these outer pieces, and Illustrator leaves us with these white insides. Okay, now the white inside is the opposite of the black line. So wherever a black line is, the white is going to be the opposite piece, and we want those white pieces. So you could do one of two things. You can come in, you can select this, and you can start deleting these black areas one by one. Or you could just select a piece of the black, and just like we normally do here, we could go to select, same, and fill color and select all the black, but it's literally selecting all of the other black that we have in this project too. So it's not always the best way to go about it, but we'll just go ahead and deselect all this stuff really quick here. Luckily I grouped everything, so it's very easy to deselect. And then we're going to hit delete. So we've just got this little bit of black down here selected. We'll hit delete. Now, yes, it's inverted. It doesn't look inverted because it's white and the white looks weird, but easy enough. We'll just come in here. We'll select our white. We want to make sure we get all of those pieces. And we're going to just drop our fill box down again and select black. And there it is. So now we have a standard copy and an inverted copy. And notice with this inversion method here, we actually end up with this extra border. I mean, you could just delete it, problem solved, and you get more or less the same result as this method down here. It's just another way to do it. A lot of people, you know, think this way is easier. A lot of people think this way is easier. More or less the same thing though. So now you've got this inverted look. And when we kind of, let's just resize this a little bit here. If I grab both of these and we bring them onto our little test area, you'll see again, they are pretty aesthetically different. They certainly don't have the same feel to them, right? They've got differences. Whichever one of these you like better, totally up to you. But you can create very simple vector inversions just with either of these methods, whether you want to go with the stroke and unite method, or you want to go to the rasterize and retrace method. Either will work, and you can get really nice inverted graphics that way. And I wanted to show you, it doesn't matter if you're, unlike, you know, with raster images, it was really important whether or not we did an inverted graphic based on the material, right? Whether it was marking lighter or darker. With vectors, it doesn't matter so much. With vector images, it certainly could matter depending on what you're engraving, but it's far less likely to make a difference. And just to prove that, I'm going to do one more of these Illustrator inversions for you here, just so that we can kind of prove that. So for this one, I'm going to go with the stroke method. Again, in reality, right, I set this to white because this is how it would mark. So this is just really there to be a visual guide as to what the final mark would look like. But while we're working with them, there's nothing wrong with setting them to black. So we'll do the stroke method on this one, and we'll come up here. We're just going to add some stroke to it till we get like a nice border. And you can go as big with these as possible. And I'm really glad we did this one now. You'll see sometimes our paths aren't super straight and we get these weird choppy, spiky bits. Very easy to fix. If we just select our graphic that we're adding the stroke to, we can drop our stroke window down here. So we just want to select round join instead of the miter join. Okay, the round join gonna solve that problem for us right away. After that, we can come up here to Object Expand and expand that stroke into a nice solid shape. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Next, we want to come up to Object Expand, and we want to expand that stroke into a nice solid shape. And then lastly, Pathfinder again, guys, Unite, Merge, Unite. And that's going to give us that nice solid shape there. So with that done, we can now come in here. We're going to change the original graphic to white, and we're going to center it up on our shield, just like that. And again, our black shield shape here is covering our white area. So we're going to right click, arrange, send to back, select the whole thing, Pathfinder again, trim, right? We just did all this. We're going to right click and ungroup. We're going to deselect. Okay, can't stress that enough. A lot of people get hung up there. Deselect, and then we're going to select the white, select same fill color, and then we'll just deselect that one because we don't want that, and we're going to hit delete. And once that's done, we've got our inversion. There it is. It's right there for you. It's ready to go. Just to show you now, these look the same. Why do these look the same? Well, it's because with this, we're actually marking the mountain, right? Here, the mountain is not being marked. So don't be confused. If I pull this back out and we actually set this to black, here you can see, right, the mountain is certainly being marked on this graphic, even though it looks like it's not. It's not very intuitive, but there is a difference here. Even if we get rid of our super big chunky thing, we can get rid of that. We have our inverted and our standard, and if we set both of these to white, which is how they're going to be marked, we can bring them over to our sample anodized aluminum plate. So we'll just go ahead and extend that out, and then we're going to grab our artwork. And let's bring that on here. And now you can really see that they indeed are different, right? In one of these, the outer crest is being marked, right? The background behind hiking is being marked. In this one, the outer crest is not being marked. We've got actually a second layer up here, and the hiking text is being marked, but the sky is being left alone. So quite different results depending on how you choose to invert your vectors. So we're not quite done yet. This is kind of easy mode over here. So I'm just going to get rid of all this so that we're not distracting ourselves. So let's take a look at this graphic, right? This graphic is very easy to invert because we've got these hard borders, 2 of them, in fact. It gives us a lot of leeway for inverting this graphic. But let's just say for a second, if we ungroup that and get rid of these borders, we might have a little more trouble inverting something like this. And the big reason why is because we've got this text and it's just kind of floating up here. So we're not actually going to get a nice white negative value up here. And I'll show you really quick. So if we grab this, right, and let's just say we're going to do the raster method. So we'll come to Object, Rasterize, and we'll hit OK at 600 dpi, just like we did last time. When we hit Image Trace, and again we'll hit OK here, what we're going to get is kind of this big, ugly, white thing there. But we can't really do much with that, right? If we came in and deleted all of this black, and I'm not going to take too long doing this, let's just select same fill color and unselect these. So if we were to get rid of all of this black, right, and then we change this to the black instead, I mean, that's fine technically. It does the job, but we could do so much better than this. This is pretty hideous with this like square up here. It just doesn't look very good. So there's a few methods that we can use in order to fix this situation. So I'm just backing up here. I'm going to try to, yep, there we go. So back to vector. So what can we do? Well, for one, I highly recommend the stroke inversion on this, right? So let's play around with that first. So over here we have our hiking, right? We've got our mountain, we've got our pickaxes. So let's just go ahead and add a stroke to this. You guys are going to see that this comes out much better. So with the stroke there, this is kind of a minimal stroke, but it'll do the trick. Again, we have these spikies over here, so let's just go ahead and change that to the round join, and we're going to Object Expand. So let's expand that stroke, and we're going to hit Unite and Merge and Unite, and that's going to seal everything up. So this is going to look a lot better for an inversion here. So you know the deal. From here, we're going to grab this. Let's just make another copy because we're going to do another method in a minute, and we're going to change this to white. You guys should be kind of catching on here by now. And we'll group, or we're going to align these real quick. So align. Let's send this to the back. And there we go. There's our little kind of like setup there. And then last but not least, we just have to trim this. So let's trim that white out. Ungroup. Select same fill color. And we gotta, of course, deselect that white graphic and hit delete. So that's certainly better. It's an improvement for sure. It's still not my favorite thing, but it's an option, right? And then we can really start to get into like maybe some custom shapes, okay? And this is really kind of where things start to get a little icky, but trust me, the results are going to be well worth it. So with this, we're kind of going to separate this into 2 different tasks. We've got our mountain range issue and we've got our hiking issue, and we should look at these separately. So with the mountain range, let's ungroup this so we can edit these separately. A big part of what's causing our problem here are these weird runoff lines that we're getting in the mountains, right? We don't like these. They don't look very good. What we want to do is we want to actually select our mountains up here, and we want to seal these off. If we right click the paintbrush tool and we grab the blob brush tool, we'll be able to come in and actually add to this vector. So if you'll watch here, I'll just come down and draw, and when I let go, it all becomes part of the same vector now. And we can really take advantage of this blob brush here to start painting things in. Notice that I am just working with the raw graphic here. We don't actually have a background on it, and this is how you want to use the blob brush. If there is a white background behind this mountain, it's going to cause issues for us. So I'm going to come in, let's just make this brush really big. I don't usually go crazy on the detail here, guys, with this. We want it to accurately represent a, silhouette of the shape that we're trying to invert, but we don't need to go really nuts on the little details. We just want to get it filled in. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this in real quick, literally everything, because we're getting our details from the original image. This is just the background, so there's no reason that we need to allow a lot of the detail to survive here. Even if we go a little bit, you saw me go a little bit out of bounds, out of the lines there, that's okay. It's going to look fine when it's done anyway. And there's the connection right there, so we're going to connect that up and fill the rest of that in, and that's the mountain done. We'll deal with more of this in a minute. We're actually going to add a stroke to this just like we normally do, but we'll come back to that. We also need to deal with hiking, right? This hiking thing is an issue. There's a few different ways you could go about this. You could grab the blob brush and you could blob the hiking together just in a way that makes sense for those particular letters so that it looks, at the end it'll look kind of like something like that. But I think the better way is to actually go with some custom shapes. If we come in here and we grab the round rectangle tool, we can just draw a square, right? So let's just draw our square right there. That's going to look pretty good. If you want, you can group the word up. So let's group that, and then we can center our black box to the hiking text. And that's just we're just creating a space for that text to live. Give it some nice rounded corners, something like that. And then if we really want to keep the triangles over here, we could do the same thing with maybe like an ellipse. So we could just create a small ellipse here. Something like that, I don't know, you have to play around with it, but we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna center, and then we'll make a copy and we'll just center that over the other triangle. Now this is going to invert much better. With the text and triangles up here, we still have some hidden shapes that are going to mess things up for us later, so let's just make sure we unite that. And now we've got a nice backdrop for our inversion. So I know this has been kind of a lengthy process, but the last thing that we want to do is add a stroke to our outline. Remember, this outline down here, we just kind of closed off the edges. We didn't actually make it any bigger. And if we don't make it any bigger, then we won't be able to see it with our original graphic on top of it. So we're going to add a little bit of a stroke to the mountain range itself, just so that we're able to see it. Something like that. Doesn't have to be crazy. Let's go to Object, Expand. And one more time, we're going to unite that. And we're not going to do the same thing to the text, because we know the text and the triangles already fit inside these shapes, so there's no real need to do that. Finally, we can group this all. We're going to grab our original graphic up here. We'll make another copy, okay? And we're going to set that to white, because this is what we're going to use for our trim. And let's center it up over our new backdrop. Send the backdrop to the back, so arrange, send to back, okay? And now we're looking really good here. This is looking pretty cool already. We could probably make a couple changes to these shapes, and you can experiment with that as you see fit, but for now we're just going to finish it off. So let's come up here to Pathfinder, let's find our trim function, there it is. And then lastly, we'll ungroup, select the white, select same, fill color, there it is. And of course, we have to deselect that again and delete. And there it is. This is a much nicer version, I think, personally, than the one that we created just with the simple stroke without closing off the ends. I think that makes a really big difference there. There's a lot better detail. We could even, if we don't like how something like maybe say that came out, we could just grab the regular stroke one and just throw that one in. Maybe we like that better, but at the end of the day, it's totally up to you. You can mix and match these. You can use different techniques for different styles of vectors or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. But that's the 101 on inverting, guys. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to make a huge difference. This is just especially with vectors, you know, of course with rasters, it really matters. With vectors, it's far more of an aesthetic choice. And I know I mentioned that earlier, but however you plan on doing this is going to yield different results, right? And, you know, some people are really going to want something like this. Some people are really going to want something like that. That's fine. You have the option now. We've given you the tools today so you can sit down and actually have some choices, and you'll be able to make a decision on what you want to do. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Laser Everything. As usual, I hope you got a ton out of it. If you got value out of it, don't forget to smash the like button. Let everybody else know the content is good, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you get notified the next time I upload a video. If you love Laser Everything and it's the best thing that ever happened to you and you want to make sure that we continue uploading videos, the number one way to do that is by supporting the channel via the Laser Master Academy. It's the number one way to support the channel, and it comes with a bunch of awesome bonus goodies for you, like access to exclusive live streams, bonus episodes of the podcast, our laser parameter libraries, and a whole lot more. So if you love the show and you want to show your support, go check it out. You can find it over at masters.lasereverything.net. Check out our free, absolutely free Discord server and Facebook group. Links to those down in the description as well. I think that's all I've got once again, guys. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, no, just kind of neat.